So, in this lecture we are going to talk about how we are going to evaluate whether the change has been successfully implemented and whether the intended outcome of the change has been received or not. So, basically in this lecture we are going to measure the progress of the change both in qualitative and quantitative terms and see that how we can measure the outcome of the change. See, it is very important to ensure that any change initiative that has taken place have been implemented successfully and become a part of the organization. So, you need to ensure that whether it is giving the desired result for which it has been initiated or not. For example, if you think that you have gone for a change in the technology to ensure that your productivity level goes up, the efficiency level is high. So, whether this productivity and efficiency has really increased or not, and if the productivity and efficiency has really increased significantly and you find that whether it is cost effective or not, then only you can ensure that the change is successfully implemented, it has become a part of the organization and it is giving intended outcome for the organization. So, with this preamble we are starting discussing about how we are going for evaluating the change. So, what is the basic objective, right? So, basically here we are going to examine the arguments that why we need to go for evaluating any kind of organizational change, right. We also need to consider the limitations of the evaluation. See, every time it is not possible for you to evaluate change in monetary terms, because sometimes you find that there is a qualitative change that has been introduced, right. When it comes to performance, then you can easily measure the level of performance that has been achieved after the change and you can see whether there is significant improvement in or there or not. But say for example, you are able to bring about a change in the recruitment process, right. So, this recruitment process might result in getting good candidates for the organization, but how to ensure and evaluate that yes, this kind of change has brought in these kind of result in more quantitative terms, that is not possible, right. And then you also need to look at the different kind of evaluation that happens. When we are talking about evaluation and the different kind of evaluation, you can see that there could be different kind of evaluation. There could be evaluations which could be subjective in nature, there could be evaluations which are more objective in their approach, right. That is what we have been talking about, qualitative and quantitative evaluation. Just like outcomes which could be qualitative or quantitative, even evaluation could be qualitative and quantitative, right. For example, if you remember, when we are going to look at the outcome of any change effort, we try to start with see whether this change has been successfully implemented or not. So, you use certain parameters to ensure that whether the change is successfully implemented or not. So, at each level of the change stage, if you look at Kotter's 8 stages or any other model or framework that we have used to go for a change. So, then you need to see that at each stage of change whether you have gone for intended result or not, and at the end of it whether this change has resulted in something that is worthwhile, which is going to be valued by the people and the organization, and it is bringing the intended outcome, right. So, you have to see that what are the different frameworks that could be used for evaluation, whether you are going to evaluate it in terms of ROI, right, that okay, in terms of cost benefit analysis you can say that with the how much money is spent on this kind of change and what is the outcome, especially those changes where you are going to invest lot of money. Okay. For example, if you want to go for technological changes, okay, and when you try to buy a new technology, then it would require lot of costs, and then you also calculate the benefits that this technology is going to bring. So, once technology is successfully installed in the organization and it starts working, then you see that what kind of results are coming out. So, you go for more objective evaluation, right. In some cases you also go for some kind of subjective evaluations, you go for observations, right, whether things are working in the way it has been intended. Then you also need to see that what are the difficulties in evaluation, right. Sometimes it is not possible to go for observation, sometimes it is not possible to get the results in time. So, there could be lot of difficulties when you go for evaluating any kind of change system. And finally, any kind of change initiative must be considered or evaluated in terms of the cost and benefit, because any kind of change initiative or any kind of change that is carried out in the organization involves or incurs certain costs. And then any kind of change management that is initiated, the assumption is that it is going to provide you some likely benefits in the future. So, maybe after some time, once the change gets say consolidated, then you try to start measuring whether this change is giving good result or not. So, there could be lot of issues related to the evaluation in terms of why you want to go, what are the limitations, what kind of methods and frameworks that you use, what kind of issues and problems will come up in evaluation, and whether it is possible to evaluate it in terms of cost benefit or not. So, moving this, why we go for evaluation, what it is important. See, it is very, very important, because at least that will give you some idea whether the change is successfully implemented or not, right. What kind of learning has taken place. So, there could be lot of learning experiences, whether we adopted professionally all kind of practices which were required for managing the change effectively or not, okay. And whether you have been able to develop some best practices because of the change effort that you have been able to bring out. Okay. It means in terms of systems, practices, improvements, right, and whether it is going to influence the policy of the organization and what kind of attitude they would have when they go for the any kind of change initiative next time, right, not only related to the change, but related to other issues also. And these are the valid reasons, you can say, that is why organizations go for evaluating. Okay. As we discussed, it is very, very important to identify how you are going to evaluate, what kind of practices you are adopting, and you want to ensure that whether all standard norms and practices have been adopted while evaluating the change or not. Second part, learning. What kind of learning has happened? Okay. What kind of experiences people have related to the change, and how these learning outcomes could be used, or the experiences can be used by the people next time when they go for these kind of initiatives. Okay. And then what kind of development has happened. Here we talk about evidence based practices. Evidence based practice, that is empirically you have data and evidence to suggest that, okay, see, we have gone for this kind of change and this is the result, this is the outcome that we have achieved out of it. So, this is what we call evidence based result, where you are able to show the evidence of any kind of change initiative, right. And finally, whether it is going to influence the policies related to the HR or any kind of thing for which you want to go for a change. So, there are lot of reasons you can find out, because of which we go for evaluating the change in the organization. Now, moving further, these are some of the data that we have related to change, right. So, this data suggests basically what are the practices which is adopted by highly effective organizations, right. So, what are the focus of the change enablers, okay, and how they go for managing any kind of organizational change. Now, if you look at this, these are some of the, say, parameters that have been used for evaluating the change, right. Here you can see two kind of lines basically in this graph. One is red and black. Red shows the effectiveness, and or it is highly effective, and if it is black, it shows a gray, it shows minimally effective. Now, if you look at what are the practices on which change managers focus upon, the one most important is the milestones and metrics. What kind of metrics and milestones are used to measure the effectiveness of the change program, right. So, if organizations have well defined milestones, then the different at different stages of change they identify, okay, what is to be achieved at these different levels, and they also have certain metrics which gives you hard data, right. So, in 80%, 86% cases it has been found that those organizations who have been highly effective, and has gone for a change, they have well defined milestones and matrices. Similarly, if you look at another important factor, that is we have been talking about climate, strong climate for implementing change. So, that is equally important, and that gives rise to a senior management commitment to the change, whether senior managers are really committed to the change, because that could be one of the parameters for successful change. If there is a high commitment level from the senior managers who are going to support these kind of initiatives, then there is a possibility of success, right. And the data shows that yes, in at least 86% cases it was there, right. Then ownership and accountability, that is another important. This accountability of the change leaders and the change managers and the persons who are responsible, yes, that is equally important. It shows 80% and 24%. Then standardized project management practices, what kind of systems and practices you adopt on the way of the change, right. So, project management systems practices are used because you know that any kind of change initiative is considered as a project, and when you consider it as a project, then you also follow certain practices, like whether you have identified what are the various stages, the various milestones, what are the intended outcome at each of these stages, what are the deadlines that you have to achieve intended target at each of these stages. So, if you follow standard project management practices, then it is good, and those organizations who have adopted it have been found to be highly successful. Then sponsors, yes, you also need resources, and for that you need to ensure that the management is ready to sponsor, because if it is you are not having enough resources, then any kind of change initiative cannot be implemented successfully, and that is also very important. Now, if you look at this, you can find out the kind of practices which effective organizations who have enabled change successfully adopt in their organizations. Moving further, we have data to show about the role of communication in the change. If you remember, in the past few lectures we have been emphasizing about the communication, right. So, communication is very important. So, you also need to measure the role of communication. So, if the communication is very critical to any kind of effective change management. Now, the data suggests that yes, effective communication plan is very important. Then how these communication plans are being executed by the organization, that is equally important, 64%. And then how you identify, measure and see that is this the communication of the intended benefits of the change. It means what kind of strategies you adopt and how you communicate. It means the skills of communication is equally important. So, what you are going to communicate, the benefits of the change, and if it is communicated well, then it gives good results. So, in this context, what I am trying to tell you that three things that we have discussed in the past related to the need for communication at each stage when you are going to communicate with certain outcomes, right. What is your communication strategy, right. What is your communication plan with different stakeholders at different stages depending upon the requirement and need of the stakeholders, and then your communication skills. All this become very important. So, communication should also be measured, because that also contributes to the effectiveness of any change management program, and then you have to see what is the role of the communication in the change management effectiveness, right. Moving further, when we are talking about sustenance of the change, what happens? The sustenance is measured on three dimensions, that is whether the intended change has achieved its goals and objectives or not, whether it was achieved in time, it means there is no deadline extensions or deadlines of the projects, and whether the resources which was provided to meet these goals and deadlines on time were appropriate enough or not. Now, if you look at this, you will find that those organizations who are able to sustain change have been able to meet their goals at least 65% level. Similarly, 64% organizations have been able to meet their change goals on time. It means there is no extension for the deadlines for the projects related to any change management. For example, when you are going for commissioning a new technology, the moment you think about it, and finally, when it gets installed and starts working, right. So, you see that deadline for this project and see whether it has been able to complete on time or not, and then finally, the budget is very important, right. So, all these three factors are very important. So, any kind of change initiative, if you think that yes, you need to go for ensuring that it is going to be sustainable and it is able to perform well, then you need to ensure that it is able to meet its goal, and that is one of the objectives of evaluating change, whether the change intended outcome have been achieved or not, in terms of performance or behavior, whether it achieved in time or not. And the third one is whether you have been able to meet within the resources that have been allocated for this particular project, right. Moving further, when we are going to measure the effectiveness of the change, okay, then you have to see that how much time is required, right. As you know that when any kind of change starts, because of there is some kind of trigger, okay. If you look at this curve, you can see what happens and at what level you reach the targets related to the productivity, right. In the beginning, you go for it because there is some trigger, maybe external trigger or internal trigger, say technology is trigger here, there is an example. Then you think that how it is going to work. So, maybe your expectations gets inflated in the beginning, then you try to make a balance, and here in the process you get disillusioned because you think that it is not working, right. It means you are not able to meet your targets, and this delusion is going to be there for some time, because you know that you are not sure whether it is going to work or not, whether it is going to be effective or not, and then as you move ahead you get enlightened, you think that oh, it is good, it has started working, and then the performance is there, right. So, it happens because initially you are not sure or uncertain, right. So, now if you look at the emotional reactions, if it is very high, then these kind of things may happen. Once the emotions get settled, then you can think about it. Okay. So, this what is important here is managing the emotional reactions of the employees, so that you are able to achieve your intended outcomes. And then you also need to see that what is the time period that is required to ensure that the change is sustainable and it starts giving results. Okay. So, do not be in a hurry. If you are looking for a quick change, it may not be good. So, make sure that there is enough timeline, and that is why in any kind of project management exercise, we also have deadlines for each and every stage to ensure that these deadlines are met with targets, so that ultimately at the end of the project you are able to execute it successfully, right. Moving further, another important thing that need to be looked into here. See, we have already talked about these issues, but why we are discussing it here? Then you need to ensure that any kind of change initiative is aligned with the need for the change. It means you are thinking about the change, but it does not have a basis. So, the first evaluation actually starts to ensure that the need for the change and the initiative that has taken place is matching with each other, right. For example, if you have certain external triggers, right, and you want to bring about a change which does not match with those external triggers, I am an internal triggers, then the kind of matching, the alignment that is there should not be there. For example, if you think that yes, your performance is getting down because of the technology, right. So, instead of bringing about an updated technology, you go for restructuring the organization, it is not going to help you. So, what I am trying to tell you that you need to ensure that your change initiatives is dependent upon the correct diagnosis of the external environment, so that you are able to correctly identify the need for the change, because this is the first stage where alignment is required. If this alignment is not good, whatever you do at later stages is not going to be very effective and successful, right. So, it is very important to ensure, and that is how we start measuring any kind of change success to ensure that whether there is alignment between the need for the change and initiatives that have been taken, because any kind of change initiative must be based on the need that is required by the organization, and this need is diagnosed based upon the external environment. So, once you are able to diagnose the external environment, able to identify your vision, mission and strategies, we have already covered it, and based on that you are going to assess the need for the change. If you find that there is a need requirement for the change, then go for it. If you think that depending upon the current organizational environment, internal and external both, you do not need to go for a change, then do not go for it, because any kind of change effort requires resources, right. And if you think that yes, there is a need for change, then go for it. Look at the internal and external environment as well as the internal environment, including structure, culture, technology, people, all kind of things. And then you ask this question, what and how? What would be the direction of the change? What kind of change you want to bring and how? What kind of change framework you want to use? We have already talked about it. So, at each stage you can see and evaluate whether you have followed a proper framework for not only identifying the need for the change, but whether the change initiative is matching with the need for the change or not. So, once you are able to correctly identify the change direction, identify the framework and then see whether it is matching or not, whether aligning change models, initiatives with preparedness, whether the organization is ready for these kind of things or not, and only then it is going to be successful. So, what I am trying to tell you here is that you need to ensure that change initiatives are in alignment with the need for change, and that is the first level of measurement to ensure that you are moving in the right direction. Then second is what is your strategy for executing the change, implementing the change. You can adopt a balanced scorecard approach, where at different level you can measure different kind of things to ensure whether the change is successful or not. At the first level, you have decided about your final outcomes of the change, right, and what is the strategy to achieve it. Second stage, what you do? You develop your strategy for the change and link it with the results and see what are the critical essence of the outcomes that is desired from the change. Once you have done, then break each change theme into a manageable change objectives, either in a balanced scorecard framework, that is you are going to measure it in terms of financial terms, customer, internal processes and learning and development. Because any kind of change management effort, if it is measured using a balanced scorecard approach, then each change theme has to be managed into this balanced score framework, and balanced scorecard framework talk about 4 types of outcomes. That is, what is the financial outcomes of the change effort, how it is going to affect the customer relationship. Then the next stage is how it is able to help you to improve the internal processes, and what kind of learning and development activities has happened because of this change, what kind of experiences and learning has happened for the employees, right. You can do it separately or you can integrate it, a non-balanced scorecard approach, but this non-balanced scorecard approach is not good, because if you are measuring it separately for it, then you can see that how it is related with all the change outcomes that you had expected. And then at the fourth stage, you develop certain performance measure for each change objective. How much change has been there in the customer relationship or the improvement, the internal processes in terms of systems and practices, learning and development, right. So, that is how you are able to measure the performance and see that whether you have been able to achieve it or you have been lagging behind, right. And finally, the change outcome that you have achieved and the change themes and the change results and the change objectives, and see the cause effect relationship. This is the need for the change, this is the diagnosis, this is the need for the change, this was the strategy, this kind of change was implemented successfully, this is the outcome. So, you can show a linear relationship between everything, starting with intended outcomes to the change themes to then change results and achieving the objectives, and see that which change result is an outcome of what. So, you are able to establish a cause effect relationship, and you can say that this change has resulted in this kind of things, right. So, this could be another strategy where you are using a balanced scorecard framework to analyze and evaluate the change results. Then, as I told you that what could be the criteria, the parameters that you use for measuring the success of a change program. Okay. That is meeting the goals and objectives of the change initiative. So, and this could be in the following area, because the focus of the change is these 5 sets of things, right. Because you want to bring about change in the people management systems, you want to bring about a change in the structure, the technology, systems and processes are the strategies, right. So, since these are the focuses of the change and we have already talked about it in detail. So, if you want to bring about a change say in the people management system, okay, say performance management system, or you want to move to an online recruitment system, right. So, whether it has been successfully implemented or not, a structure, whether you have, what kind of structure you have, now what kind of structure you intend to have, and with what kind of benefits it is going to have. So, whether the new structure has resulted in those benefits. So, can you establish a cause effect relationship or not? Coming to the technology, right, what is the impact of this new technology that you want to bring, and whether those intended benefits have been achieved out of this new technology in terms of efficiency and performance. So, you can measure the impact of technology in terms of certain productivity measures like output input ratio, see whether you are able to achieve efficiency or not. Then systems and processes, whether you want to bring about a change in the systems and processes, and whether this change in the systems and processes is also related again to the same parameters of productivity and efficiency, whether it has been brought good results in terms of efficiency and productivity of the people and the organization. And finally, the strategic changes. The strategic changes are basically the results of the assessment of the environment, because you try to assess the environment and based on that you try to develop or change your strategy, so that you are able to compete in the market. So, whether strategic changes that you have been able to bring in the organization, what is the outcome in terms of achieving more markets, being more competitive, right. So, whether your competitiveness has increased or not. So, these kind of measures could be used to see whether these strategic changes have been successful or not. So, when you are going to measure the success, you are going to use these criteria for evaluating, because the focus of the change is these things. So, you need to see whether there is any kind of change that has happened in this is related to those performance criteria of effectiveness and productivity. So, when you are going to measure change effectiveness, right, the basic idea is that whether it is able to add some value or increase the value of the organization or not, and that is why if it is going to increase value, then it is good at different stages. The first stage, you are able to correctly diagnose and solution what is the change program, whether you are able to clearly identify the problem, what is the root cause, what kind of future state you have imagined, what is the clear picture of the future state, whether you have a solution for this or not. It means your diagnosis and solution must be correct in terms of assessment of the requirement of the change. Then your planning and resourcing, what is your project plan, what is the resources that you have, what kind of skills are required, right, what kind of team you have with the roles and responsibilities, especially the change management team, right, what kind of communication systems you are using. So, all this is a part of planning and resourcing that is to be decided. So, the evaluation can be at this level, at next moving to this level, and third execution level. What is your execution plan, right? What is the level of commitment of various stakeholders? Are you monitoring the progress on a monthly basis and see whether something is working or not, right? And how you adjust and communicate the plan if it is required at the implementation stage. And finally, when it comes to realizing the end desired state, the future state, do you think that there is a high engagement in implementing the new approach? Do you see the evidence of new behaviors of the results, whether the business has consistently implemented the new processes, whether the evidence of progress or not. So, when we are going to evaluate change effectiveness, basically you are going to measure them at 4 level, and finally, if it is there, then you can say that yes, you have been able to create some kind of value for the organization by bringing about the intended change. So, the first thing that we talked about, that you can use the balanced scorecard approach, or second thing that you can do is qualitatively, that at each stage of the change process you can see whether you are doing the right kind of things or not. And if you have been doing right kind of things, it means that you are closer to achieving your intended outcomes, and that is how we are able to measure the change effectiveness, right. So, what is the criteria of success for each of these stages? It means that you are able to create better strategic fit, you have the capacity or readiness for the change, goal clarity and alignment to the strategic direction. So, this shows that this stage, these are the indicators of the success. Then planning and resourcing stage, your sponsors, your quality of the project plan, accountabilities, resources, right. And the third stage, whether it is done in time, scope, within the budget or not. Then whether is alignment with the strategic portfolio, people related issues are there is support for direction, and finally, realization of the future state, which include new behaviors, new employee engagement, improved quality, loyalty, whatever it is, reduced cost, improved sales. So, these are some of the benefits that you are going to achieve. So, this could be used as a criteria for measuring the success at each stage of the change program, which could be used successfully to ensure that the change is implemented successfully and it is providing intended results, right. And this is a roadmap that we are going to talk about at different stages. So, look at the first stage, these are the outcome. Okay. So, these are the criteria using the balanced scorecard approach, and at different phases, okay, when you are going to implement it, you need to ensure that whether these outcomes in terms of process execution, collaboration, right, there is no duplications and there is a high employee engagement that is achieved. At the next level, operational level, what actually happens, because you need to ensure effectiveness and competency at this level, that is the basic objective of improving the culture and learning. At the operational, you need to see that there is yes, the streamlined portfolio with which offer consistency, which is reusable, right. We are going for real time innovation. The third is customers and partners, yes, whether I am meeting the requirements or not. And finally, financials, looking into the ROI, though it is very not very easy to compute ROI, because you need to identify all the costs and benefit which is going to be there. Okay. So, if you look at this could it could be done at the first phase, you are going to measure something else, second phase, see whether it could be repeated or not, and whether it is scalable or not, whether it could be spread to other parts of the organization or not, right. So, this is how we go about evaluating and see that any kind of change management program is successfully implemented. So, what we have discussed as a conclusion in this week, we talked about the importance of communication in the change management process. We also talked about strategies and skills which is required for the communication and how to consolidate and sustain change, and finally, we talked about how to measure the effectiveness of the change, right. So, these are the books that we have followed, which will be referred to by me. Okay. So, thank you very much.